Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on structured literacy, who, what, how, and why. My name is Jennifer Ferlito, and I will be leading you through the structured literacy series. I want to acknowledge all the organizations and professionals who contributed to the information and research prepared in this presentation. Thank you to the International Dyslexia Association, the MiMTSS Technical Assistance Center, Michigan Dyslexia Handbook, Dr. Anita Archer, and Dr. Stephanie Stoller. Information provided from all of these professionals and organizations are throughout the presentation today. Here is a notice about using material in the TA Center presentations. Participants are absolutely free to share or adapt the resources that we provide, but it's important to give the TA Center credit and indicate where any changes have been made. Today, you are in session 1 of a 5-session series on structured literacy. Today, we will review who, what, how, and why of structured literacy as an intro to our series. The purpose of today is to provide an overview of structured literacy. We will review who receives instruction, what instruction entails, how it is delivered, and why structured literacy instruction is essential for developing lifelong readers for all of our learners. Our intended outcomes are listed below. We will explain how structured literacy instruction is appropriate for all learners at all tiers of instruction. We will go through the domains of structured literacy. We will go through the principles that guide delivery of our instruction. And lastly, we will go through the science of reading and discuss how the science of reading provides the foundation for structured literacy instruction. Like I said, our series is a why, what, who, how, going through those WH questions. So that is our agenda today. We're going to have an introduction and then followed by our WH hallmarks. Today, we're diving into literacy, specifically structured literacy. Our goal as educators is to provide evidence-based reading instruction that is effective for all students. There is a vast body of research that has determined that teaching students to read using structured literacy is the most powerful way to prevent reading failure. As more districts begin to embrace instruction grounded in the science of reading, we're naturally having a lot more discussions around why do we need structured literacy? What will be taught? Who are we going to teach using structured literacy? How is structured literacy delivered? These are lots of questions that education professionals have. We will dive into these questions today. Another reason that we are having a lot of these conversations is because our state has recently passed Public Act 146, which outlines details for the K-12 literacy instruction. In PA 146, it outlines that districts should have professional learning grounded in the science of reading and principles of structured literacy. So this session, along with this entire series, aligns to our new legislation. This is professional learning in the science of reading, giving principles of structured literacy. For more information on the K-12 literacy and dyslexia law, there are a variety of MDE webinars, and there is a specific email that you can direct all your inquiries to. I encourage you to go to the MDE website to learn more. I also want to share a wonderful resource, the Michigan Dyslexia Handbook. Structured literacy is highlighted in this handbook on page 12 and 17. The handbook is a wonderful resource that outlines best practices to prevent reading difficulties. It discusses assessment practices that can inform instruction and intervention. And it does have a focus on children and learners who have characteristics of dyslexia or identified with a word learning disability. The Michigan Dyslexia Handbook does have discussion on structured language and literacy. And basically, they describe it as a term to describe a specific reading approach that focuses on teaching the structure of our language, a focus on teaching the structure of our language using a very effective delivery system. And the goal is to advance our literacy skills for all learners. So I encourage you and your district and your colleagues to dig into this wonderful resource. This graphic is from the International Dyslexia Association. It will be the graphic that we work from for this entire session. As you can see, it is structured literacy, an approach grounded in the science of reading. We're going to start at the bottom of this graphic, the why, and we're going to move clockwise. So we're going to start with the why, then we'll move into the what, the who, and the how. Today, I'll give an overview of each element throughout today's session. Following today's session, in this series, session 2 through 5, there will be sessions on each language domain. So you can see under the what, there's all those purple boxes. That is what session 2 through 5 will be on, diving into those language elements. And then also the MiMTSS TA Center has a variety of professional learning sessions on explicit instruction, and that is discussed in the how. As we move through our session today, I encourage you to take notes to process the information that is presented. I encourage you to grab a piece of scrap paper or printer paper, fold it into 4 sections, and label the sections why, what, who, and how. As we move through each section of the session today, you can use this concept catcher to take notes and capture big ideas or document any questions that you may have. Here we'll begin by chatting about why. We're always going to ground ourselves in the larger graphic, and then we'll zoom in to the section that we're going to chat about. So here we have the section of the why. Why is it important to base our instruction on the science of reading? Scientific evidence from years and years of reading and writing research provides the underlying basis for structured literacy. Let's begin by talking about what the science of reading is. The Reading League provides a definition from a document called the Defining Guide. I encourage you to Google the Defining Guide document and you can download it as a PDF. It has a lot of wonderful information about foundations of the science of reading. So that's called the Defining Guide from the Reading League. And they define the science of reading as a large body of scientifically based research across disciplines about reading and issues related to reading and writing. So the science of reading is a body of research, and this research was conducted over 50 years. Studies about learning to read in multiple languages. So basically, all of these studies have provided us evidence that inform how proficient reading and writing develops, why some people have difficulty acquiring these reading and writing skills, and how we can most effectively assess and teach to improve reading outcomes. It's very important when we think about what is the science of reading to discuss what it is not. So it's not a fad, it's not one size fits all, it's not a curriculum, it is not one component of instruction, it's not only phonics. And it's also important that we caution ourselves from saying, oh, I'm teaching the science of reading. It's interesting because as districts are shifting their practice to align with evidence, sometimes we hear educators sharing, oh, we are teaching reading science. And what I want to caution you on is we are teaching our students structured literacy principles and evidence based instructional techniques. We're not teaching the science of reading. The science of reading is a body of evidence. So it's like a body of research studies, right? So the people who are teaching the science of reading are professors teaching doctoral science, are professors teaching our pre service teachers getting a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or our administrators, our consultants teaching our teachers about the research, about what evidence shows. So that is who is teaching the science of reading. When we're learning the body of evidence, we are learning the science of reading. We're not teaching our children the science of reading. We are teaching them with evidence-based instructional materials. Why should we base our instruction on the science of reading? Well, because there is documented sequence of steps that reliably, efficiently, and safely produce skilled readers. Of course, science hasn't answered all of our questions about reading, but we do have evidence that has been collected over decades on all types of children in all types of schools in a variety of languages that informs our work. And so research shows that children who start low with reading skills, they tend not to catch up. And then, of course, over time, these children spend less time reading, which means they're not learning as many word meanings, impacting their vocabulary. They aren't having as many opportunities to develop comprehension strategies. And then this oftentimes results in a negative attitude toward reading. So, why are we basing our instruction on the science of reading, on that body of evidence that we have? Because why wait until students struggle with reading? There are things we can do based off this evidence called the science of reading that we can do on day one in preschool, kindergarten, first grade that can ensure more students become readers. I encourage you to pause this webinar and jot some notes in your concept catcher about the why. What piece of information might you share with your school team? Our next section dives into what. Here is our larger graphic discussing structured literacy, and we're going to zoom in on the what section. So here we have what. What is structured literacy? It is instructional content that's integrating the domains of language as they pertain to reading. So we have word recognition and comprehension, and then written expression. So all of these purple boxes, these are the categories of what we will review in sessions 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the Structured Literacy series. Today, I'm just going to give a quick overview. We're going to start with the simple view of reading, outlining that two broad skills are necessary to reach skilled reading. On the left, we see that blue bubble of word recognition. This is the skill of knowing what sounds are represented by the letters in a word, and then the ability to blend those sounds quickly and accurately in order to read words. Next, we see the broad skill of language comprehension. Now, this is a skill area that encompasses everything needed to make meaning of oral or spoken language we hear. This is a skill grounded in the oral language system. Literacy is built on the back of our oral language skills. You'll notice a multiplication sign. This is a very important distinction because the skills required are not simply added to one another to reach reading comprehension. They are multiplied together. That means a deficit, even a slight one, in either the blue decoding skills or the green language skills has a profound impact on reading comprehension. The simple view of reading states that reading comprehension is the product of printed word recognition and language comprehension. The simple view of reading is a framework for educators to understand what's going on in the brain when their students are reading and to apply that understanding to the instructional decisions that we as educators make. So, we know that reading comprehension requires competence in both of these broad skill areas, decoding and language comprehension. So, these two big skill sets need to be connected in a student's brain through deliberate and repeated interactions with language and print. I'm going to go through a few examples of how this multiplication problem works. If a student can decode, they get a score of 1, right? They have awesome decoding skills, but they do not have grade level language comprehension. They're not going to understand what they read. 1 times 0 equals 0. So when we have a deficit in reading comprehension, there's got to be a skill deficit in one of these two areas, word recognition or language. In this example, the deficit is in language. Now we have the opposite. Let's say a student has great grade level comprehension, but they cannot decode. They're not going to understand what they read. Our goal is for students to have solid word recognition skills and solid language comprehension skills to result in skilled reading comprehension. It's also important to note that mediocre skills in word recognition and mediocre skills in language comprehension aren't going to be enough to produce a skilled reader. These two buckets, word recognition and language comprehension, are considered essential, and they inform what skills we teach and how we teach them. So basically, the simple view of reading serves as a framework for what we teach, what we assess, and how we determine where a student is struggling if they're not comprehending. The next framework I would like to go through is called the progression of reading skills. At the top, you have a bar going along the top of grade levels. So you have preschool, kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade. And then down the left, you have word recognition skills, language comprehension skills, and reading skills. And you can see that these skills are intertwined with a rope, resulting in skilled reading. I want to focus your attention on the gray bar, and that indicates formal instruction is happening during this time period. And then you'll see this zigzag visual, and that means that this skill is ongoing, having some skill refinement over time. So you'll notice that print concepts, formal instruction is happening in the early grades. You'll see that basic phonics and decoding skills and multisyllabic decoding skills is happening in the early grades through elementary, grade 5, but then it never really stops. Maybe not formal instruction is occurring, but ongoing use in skill refinement, transferring to new contexts is happening with phonics all the way to grade 12. You'll notice under language that language is being taught formal instruction K through 12. So this graphic is a wonderful visual to show that certain stages and grades have more emphasis on certain skills, but good instruction effectively integrates word recognition and language comprehension throughout their education. We're not selecting one to teach over the other. So the rope really signifies that there are many skills that come together to result in skilled or proficient reading. The reading rope is just one way to organize all the components that must be mastered for a purpose, for a person to be able to read for the purpose of learning. And that's our goal. We want our students to be able to read for the purpose of learning. So I'm actually going to take these graphics that we just went through and I'm going to map them on top of each other, or I guess rather next to each other. So here we have the simple view of reading on its side, and we have the reading progression. You can see they both have the components of word recognition and language, resulting in reading comprehension as our outcome. I want you to see that the structured literacy graphic also has these two components, word recognition and language comprehension. The elements of structured literacy line up with the simple view of reading and the reading rope progression. So these three graphics are showing very, very similar things that to produce a skilled reader who is reading for meaning with strong reading comprehension, a student must master skills in word recognition and in language comprehension. I do want to note that the bucket of word recognition and the bucket of language comprehension have a lot of skills inside those buckets that we need to be teaching our children, that our children need to master. So I just briefly went over that today, but here is a micro learning course on the simple view of reading that goes a bit deeper into the simple view of reading and discusses those buckets. So it unpacks the word recognition skills and it unpacks the language comprehension skills. So I encourage you to further your learning if you are interested. Take a moment and pause this webinar. I would like you to jot some notes and recap your learning under the category of what. The next section we will discuss is who. Of course, we're going to ground ourselves in our larger graphic about structured literacy, and I'll zoom in to the who. I want you to notice when we're talking about the who that this graphic highlights students and instructors. It highlights that instruction, structured literacy instruction, is appropriate for all students at all tiers, and all educators are to be teaching with structured literacy principles. I think it's really powerful that we're highlighting both our students and our educators. I want you to flip over your note catcher and number your paper 1 through 4. Feel free to pause this webinar if you need a minute or two to do so. I want you to think in your mind about a classroom with 24 kindergartners. Pause this webinar and answer these 4 questions. Out of those 24 kids, how many will read in a seemingly effortless way? How many of those 24 kindergartners will learn to read relatively easily with most any instruction? How many of those kindergartners, of your 24 students, are going to require code-based, explicit, systematic, and sequenced instruction? And the last question, number 4, out of those 24 kindergartners, how many are going to require that code-based, explicit, systematic, sequenced instruction, but with many intensive repetitions? Take a minute and answer those 4 questions. We will go through the answers now. Out of your 24 students, only one of them is likely to read in an effortless way. About 8 of your students will learn to read given most any type of instruction. About 10 to 12 of your students are going to require code-based explicit instruction. And about 2 to 4 of your students are going to require that code-based explicit systematic instruction with many intensive repetitions. When you look at these numbers, I like to ask 2 questions. Where do you see your students falling? And then where did you fall as a student? I fell in number 3, that code-based, explicit, systematic, sequenced instruction. When I look at these numbers, when I think about a classroom of 24 students, we need to be providing instruction that meets the needs of all of our children. All 24 of those students need to learn how to read. All 24 of those students need to receive instruction that will bring children to proficient reading. We can't provide instruction that is only good for some. And that is the benefit about structured literacy is that it is good for all. When we think about implementing our MTSS framework, we know that we're providing evidence-based instruction at 3 tiers. At tier 1, all students are provided with structured literacy instruction, whole group, whole class-wide instruction. At tier 2, we know that we have our universal screening and progress monitoring that will reveal which students are falling behind expectations. These students who need additional support and additional intervention in tier 2 are going to receive intensified instruction using the principles of structured literacy. Intensified instruction can happen in a variety of ways. The MiMTSS TA Center has a lot of wonderful professional learning sessions on intensifying instruction. We could be reducing their group size, increasing their duration, increasing the level of explicitness, increasing the amount of practice that these students are getting. Again, there are a variety of ways on how to systematically intensify student instruction. And then we have tier 3. Again, students are getting structured literacy intervention, but it is the most intensive type of support. Additional dosage and frequency with a highly qualified instructor is going to be needed. They are going to need an increased amount of practice, and increasing the level of explicitness is going to be vital. Again, children at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 are receiving structured literacy instruction. Structured literacy instruction truly is delivered from day 1 of kindergarten by teachers who are knowledgeable in both the structure of language and how to teach the structure of language to students. Implementing structured literacy at all tiers of instruction helps meet the needs of most of our students, and it prevents high rates of literacy deficits. Structured literacy is also appropriate for our English learners. Like I said, structured literacy is appropriate for all. Our English learners are a rapidly growing population in the United States schools. We have varying backgrounds. We have a variety of children whose native language is not English. So the importance of teaching our English learners foundational reading skills and English language development together are going to help them understand the meaning of words and text. We need to be building upon their individual assets as an English learner. Educators can incorporate English language learners' knowledge of their native language to support their development of English. They are going to need structured literacy instruction in word recognition, in language comprehension, and in English language development. Take a moment and pause this webinar to fill out your notes in the category of who receives structured literacy. Put a star by your most important idea. The last section that we will go through is how. Here is our larger structured literacy visual, and the how is on the right side of this graphic. So how do we deliver structured literacy instruction? Essential principles of instruction guide how this content is taught for both reading and writing. Principles of structured literacy are beneficial for all students, and it's absolutely necessary for our students who are struggling. Explicit instruction is systematic. It is an instructional approach that includes a very specific delivery and design of the procedures that you're implementing. When we think about systematic, That means that the organization of our material that we're teaching follows a very logical order. That sequence is going to begin with the easiest, most basic concepts and then progress to more difficult. When we are using principles of explicit instruction, nothing is left to chance. There's no incidental learning. When we are teaching explicitly, it is intentional with the goal of teaching to mastery. Our students are mastering the skills that we're teaching. We're not just exposing kids to content, we're teaching so that the content is mastered. And when I talk about mastery, it means that they own the skill. They are automatic and independent at the skill we are teaching. It is called explicit because it is unambiguous. It is a very, very direct approach to teaching. When we think about the word explicit, we're telling students exactly what you want them to know and exactly what you want them to do. When we think about systematic, we're using very purposeful review and practice. And when we think about sequential, we're carefully moving students from easier to harder tasks in a very planned sequence. This direct approach to teaching is called structured literacy. This is a wonderful visual that I saw presented by Margaret Goldberg a few years ago. She was illustrating how high frequency words were taught in two different programs. So these two different programs on the left and on the right, it's going to highlight for us what systematic cumulative instruction looks like. So on the left, the program taught these words pretty sporadically across 26 weeks. And on the right, the high frequency words were introduced deliberately and gradually over time with continuous practice. So when you're using a scope and sequence, it affords this type of practice for our students. On the right image, you can see that the teaching is sequenced from simple to complex. And that means that the instruction is systematic. It builds off previously learned skills, which means that it's cumulative. It's not a one and done type of skill. So look at the amount of practice that is built in when we're teaching explicitly. Think about any new concept that we're teaching. It could be high frequency words, it could be math facts, it could be a comprehension strategy. How many times are we embedding it? Or is that skill that we're teaching, is it one and done? It should always follow a scope and sequence with cumulative guided practice. Feel free to pause this webinar and review your entire concept catcher. Take a few notes on the how to recap what we just chatted about, and then look at all four boxes. I would love for you to take some notes on your key takeaways from today's learning. You could fill in the sentence starter, I used to think, but now I know. You could put a star on things that you would like to share with a colleague. Take a moment to process your learning. Structured literacy emphasizes the structure of language across the speech sound system. So that would be phonology. Structured literacy emphasizes the writing system, the structure of sentences, the meaningful parts of words, the meanings of words, phrases, sentences, and text, right? It processes the oral and written discourse. So we have all elements of language incorporated in our instruction: phonology, orthography, syntax, morphology, semantics is all incorporated in structured literacy instruction. And then explicit teaching is fundamental to structured literacy. It incorporates instruction that is sequenced from simple to complex. It builds off previously learned skills and includes many opportunities for our learners to respond. It's very interactive, and it's really based on ongoing use of assessment data to inform and adjust our instruction. I hope this first session was beneficial for you as an intro to structured literacy. Our next session will discuss phonemic awareness and phonics. Thank you for your time. I recommend you going to the MiMTSS TA Center website and looking into professional learning offerings in the categories of MTSS, explicit instruction. Thank you.